What if he could have a tamping tooth?
It's like a long tooth, like humans have evolved a tooth in the future.
For tamping the rollies.
Because the men that smoked cigarettes more, like, reproduced wildly, and so, like, we've evolved, like, it's like the year, like, 4 million AD. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, some really weird eccentricities of evolution, like, based on, like, Instagram.
Yeah. Just being a Chad. Just
like, I don't... having slender fingers that can click iPhone keyboards faster gives you evolutionary preference.
Actually, if anything, I think that evolution, just purely by, like, the reproductive numbers, is actually probably favoring the reproduction of, like, people with like short attention spans and like people who basically don't do long-term relationships. That's where ultimately where evolution is favoring, because, like, in the past, you know, there wasn't it was, you know, you pretty much had one shot. You know, you get up in the morning, you're like, I gotta live. There's, like, few people around me that I could, like, you know, have a relationship with, and it's going to be sanctioned by my village, and that's that. But now it's like the things holding you back are just, like, not really holding you back, but it's like more of like personal choice. Like, if you want to pursue a family, or if you just want to be like a Chad. And I mean, honestly, the most reproductive success, like the most successful reproductive strategy would be to just, like, go around the world and assume a fake identity and have tons of babies, and you know, just exploit the lack of a unified international child support framework. I'm sure there's people who do that, who just take literally, like, their genetic programming. See, honestly, I'm really glad humans came up with art and culture, because it seems like such a waste of technology.
To be humans? Is a waste?
To just not come up with more higher level, like, ways of measuring our success in life. Like, DNA has a pretty straightforward, like, metric of success, like reproduction, survival and reproduction.
Yeah, I think saying it out loud like you just did points out the fallacy of it to me so clearly. That's not success. What use is spreading your genes if it results in a collapse of values in a new dark age?
They're just like...
These long-term relationships are what art and culture depends on.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe if only because you have to have a reason to keep living. And you need...
Well, you have to have your needs met to be free and fulfilled enough to have time to think about art.
Well, yeah, but I think, as we've talked about before, like, creativity and sexuality are coming from the same root energy. So I feel like, in a way, making art is like humans taking the base libido and transforming it into something...
Just channeling it responsibly, yeah. I'd say.
Responsibly. Yeah, because if you're not turning it into art, you're turning it into war, or you're turning it into... Yeah, pretty much war. Oh, shit. Oh.
Did you do it again?
No. Fate has smiled on me. I almost dropped my ash in my coffee again. It's a message to me that I should be more careful.
Yeah, I had this, like, flow chart that I texted to you a month or two back about...
You did? I feel like I would have remembered a flow chart.
It wasn't visually a flow. It was a text.
Okay.
It was a text.
Oh, gotcha.
It was like, this depends on this, depends on this, depends on this, depends on this.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can remember it. basically create more meaning, more creativity of a higher of a higher quality. That's not a one-off thing. That's not a luck thing. That's a thing of fertile ground and regularly dwelling on fertile ground. And then fertile ground is, oh God, I can already tell it was so much clearer in the text when I first had the thought. It's almost worth you bringing out your cell phone.
Scrolling back
a month.
Let me see.
If you just give it to me, I can speed scroll it, because I'll know the look of the text.
I think I remember this.
It ends in needing a transcendental ideal that you're focused on, because that inspires commitment, long-term relationships, and long-term commitments with things.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Long growth creativity requires long growth personal fertility.
Okay, stop right there. Long growth creativity. That means a career that does not fizzle out, that doesn't fade with your age, that gets more robust in your middle age, and then even more robust when you're 60 and 70. Long growth creativity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fertility requires growing trust, in effect, progressing integrity.
So you have to be better at conscientiousness more and more over time.
Oh God, that speaks to me, man. Holy shit.
You have to do what you say you're going to do and hold your word as your bond more and more and more over time. Mm-hmm. So the muse, the spirit of new ideas and innovation, knows that it's safe to stay with you, because if she lands in your nest, you're going to honor that with your word, which you hold as sacred because you've been cultivating integrity long term.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay, so personal integrity requires personal morality. That's what you're getting at. Personal morality requires focus on a transcendent ideal.
Personal morality, I'm not so good at articulating that. Personal morality is clearly knowing what's right and wrong for you, and aggressively developing that as a relationship, not as a stagnant dogma that stays the same. What's right and wrong for you now is in every respect the same right and wrong for you 20 years from now. It's something you're actively thinking about and philosophizing about and challenging.
Yeah, I think the word morality has connotations of dogma, but
well, religion has
monopolized it.
Yeah, yes.
It has.
And taken morality away from our conscious, rational minds.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, the word morality, it's the word morality.
But morality is an achievement you have to get to yourself.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
It's, I sort of have this immediate reaction to the word morality. And I'm aware of the baggage that word carries for me, because to me the word morality has connotation of limitations, because I grew up for most of my life feeling oh, well, damn, shucks, there's all this stuff I want to do, but it's bad, so I can't. And so morality to me was always, I always looked at morality not.
It was always set against
it was always
what
set
you naturally
against me.
wanted to do.
The morality that I was given, the morality of the church, was something that I felt like I begrudgingly accepted as a child, and realized that, I thought, there just has to be you can't do anything you want, because you gotta, there's, the world is danger, and so there's this, you just gotta stay on the straight, the straight and narrow, actually. The straight and narrow as a view of morality, your basic institutionalized morality of any religion, is highly proscribed. So you feel and that's why I think that's where that's where the negative connotation of the word morality comes from for me, is a sense of limitation. But it's very interesting to kind of reclaim that term and think of morality as being a way to break limitations. If you realize that...
Well, it's the most moral thing in my sense of the word. The highest morality happens to also transcend all limits over time. To accept limits is arbitrary and illusory, and is it moral, is it not? It becomes immoral when you see that it's an illusory limit and you insist upon it anyway, instead of growing as a person. That's immoral, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not immoral when you don't see those bars of your
Right.
cage and you're just happily growing the best you can. But it is immoral when you see those bars, you see further growth if you just do away with them, and you say no to the call of to the call of adventure.
It's like the artist's manifesto. Like, the only person you can really sin against is yourself.
I think that's true, yeah.
I think it's like there's a problem where, like, trying to define morality as a belief is where everything goes squirrely. Like, if you, it's like trying to assign, like, moral content to actions, to words, to things that can be described and defined is like going to be hopelessly undermined by edge cases, which eventually the edge cases that you don't really look at are going to become the main thing when you get to that point, because the edge is always receding. So if you draw the line in the sand arbitrarily and just be like, well, I'm not going to take any risks because I might step on some territory that I think is bad, then, you know, this is kind of like 101 level stuff, but I feel like it's a pervasive trick of language that morality is supposed to exist in the domain of actions, when in reality, morality is something that can't be spoken. It's like a question of values. It's like, what is your, what is the emotional content of your general will towards the world? Is it malice? Because if it's malice, if you're smart and you're full of malice, you're going to have actually a really easy time. Like, humans, it reminds me of that thing, what's that saying, like, I can't remember who said this, who coined this phrase, but like, what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. I think it was Robert Anton Wilson. He had this whole riff about like how...
Like whatever you think comes true.
Like that there's two parts of your brain, and that there's the unconscious will, and the truth is you're going to do whatever you want. And then whatever you do because you wanted to do it, the rationalization part of your brain is going to kick into gear and provide cover for what you did. And humans labor under the illusion that we figure out what we want logically and then do it and follow like rational course, but that's not the case at all. Rationalization is like a post facto, thinking is comes after acting.
Yeah.
Your values are primary.
And you have an extraordinary ability to rationalize.
Extraordinary ability.
And unite contradictions. Mm-hmm. And that's part of your physical body integrity. Your worldview is always consistent. You always have a consistent narrative for what you're doing, and it contradicts with this other thing, I think, but that is okay because of this bridge thing I conveniently think in between the two things.
Yeah.
It always makes sense to you. And I remember when we were talking about Elizabeth Warren and her batshit crazy, insane tweet about...
Blaming inflation on greedy big turkey corporations.
Saying that inflation was nothing but corruption on the part of on the part of corporations. That's all this inflation is. It's not, printing money and pumping fake money into the system. And you said she's a liar. She's too smart to be able to say that in good faith. And I said, no, she could really literally think that. And she sees someone else say that thought and she doesn't question it because it fits with her own rationalization so neatly that she doesn't bother to run it through a critical thinking process. She just accepts it immediately and repeats it to the world. And she gets reinforced, her paychecks are based on playing to that narrative. So her whole world reinforces that worldview. And everyone's worldview is rationalized to themselves and self-consistent to themselves. And there's a metaphor there to how radically healthy the body is 90% of the time, 95% of the time, how miraculously it heals itself, and how intelligent it is. There's a metaphor there, and it speaks to the synthesizing aspect of our mind that can bring polarities together in synthesis and integrate opposites. And the mind can take one thing and invent a way in which it's like another thing that is very different.
Invent, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's a hallmark of creativity, and that's one of the magical things of the human mind is in Western Civ Industrial Revolution onward understanding, up to recently, the human mind has been, our conception of it has been a stress on the analytical left brain. Like, what it is to be human is to be able to catalog and separate and zoom in on very, very minute aspects and look at them in isolation from everything else. But it's also a human trait to synthesize things and take a gestalt approach and a complex systems approach. It's just that depends on creativity and intuition and feelings to complete those kinds of thought processes, which are much less quantifiable.
Yeah, what you said about Western civilization reminds me of this thing that Alan Watts was saying, I was listening to recently, where he was talking about the central myth, how the central myth of Western civilization has evolved, where we for like many thousands of years had the myth that the world was, he calls it the ceramic model of the universe, where we perceive reality as being something that's made, like an artifact. Like, and that derives from the kind of cultures of the ancient Near East where they were pottery cultures, where you built things you built bowls and bricks and stone and stuff. And so it's in the Bible, like there's like the pot maker and stuff like that, and you build things. The reality is constructed. God made the world out of, and an interesting point that if you think that maybe that metaphor is stretching, consider the fact that the fact that Jesus was the son of a carpenter was perhaps not a coincidence. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. But in any case, we think of the world as being made. And so,
this Alan Watts's ceramic view.
He postulated that Western civilization has held the view of, for a very long time historically, has held the view of the world as being an artifact. And when the scientific, industrial, and then the scientific revolution occurred, or probably the scientific and then the industrial revolution, anyways, when those things occurred.
Sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, Western science sort of explained so many things that people were like, well, okay, so maybe there isn't God, so we're just going to brush that aside. But what we did is what we had left, we retained the image of the world as an artifact. And so now we have something that was made, but we got rid of the maker. And so that's where we're living in right now, and that's what he calls what's remaining of the ceramic myth when you strip away the maker is, he calls it the myth of the fully automatic universe, where it's just a machine, the clockwork universe, the model, the view of the world where things just happen like a machine, one thing leads to another. There's discrete events, moments, things, mechanisms, and I think it's pretty easy to see how that we've also taken that myth into ourselves and sort of, this is where I'm kind of jumping off of what he was saying, we've taken that myth into ourselves and sort of imagined that our minds work in the same way, where our actions are the result of a bunch of thoughts working together that make us do things. And so that fully automatic, there's a parallelism there where you go like, we have like, will of God, God made the world, and then that's why things happen. Psychologically, in the past, like culture revealed that people, they just thought, well, why do you do things? Like, why do people do things? It's the will of God. God is making the world, and just as he's making people that do things, but like when we got rid of that, we're left with this kind of like almost like skeletal structure where we have the framework we have like a mechanistic framework that we view the world, and we apply that mechanistic framework to how we think and act, and it obscures that idea of intention coming before action. Like we're putting the results of our intention in the place of the like the cause of our intention incorrectly. And I wonder if there's probably a lot of growth in the domain of not trying to maybe like not use rationalizations and justifications. I don't know. I guess that's interesting. I wonder what's the next, where does that myth go from here? Because he was saying something about how like in the Eastern world, they have like kind of a complementary myth that's like the organic universe, where so the world just grows. It grows like an organism, like a plant. But I think that's probably closer to the truth. That at least it captures the spontaneous essence of action better. But I wonder, like, how do we synthesize that?
Yeah, the closest thing the Western myth has is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Inspiration.
Or more immediately, the Force.
The Force. Oh my God, the Force is just the Holy Spirit, isn't it?
Yes, binding.
An energy field that flows through all living things. And
binding and interpenetrating all things and making, and that's like, that's again the metaphor for the prover of the human mind,
yeah.
the thing that synthesizes all the disparate ideas and conflicting beliefs.
Yeah, the integrator.
Yeah, the integrator. I'm getting in a couple minutes, I'm going to want to return to that flowchart text again.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
To like give a grounding chord to wherever the fuck we're going. But I'm remembering a Joe Rogan bit from yesterday. I was seeing about just the practicality of certain truths over others. The practicality of believing in God is that you just, that becomes your personal myth and you act along those lines. Oh, someone is in charge, someone loves me, so I'm worthy of love. That same force loves all beings, so there's something worthy of love in me, and also something worthy of love in every person. And is it true? Is it not true? It's more important to ask, like, with that as an input, what kind of outputs am I going to produce long term with my life? It's obvious whenever you bring a West myth and East myth comparison into a conversation, like, it's always obvious to me that they're complementary and and interdependent.
They kind of need each other.
They need each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you need the Buddhist Zen, like, ability to connect with what's happening apart from what you want to be happening, just through acceptance and the lover archetype. You just are able to see and appreciate what's happening. But then you also need the directional, like, monomyth, a monotheistic, there is a point, and there's direction, and there's an ability to go from point A to point B, and an injunction to do so, an injunction to progress under a meaningful ideal.
So I don't have a lot of experience with video games, but I used to know one of my friends in high school was this Korean guy who was obsessed with the game Fallout.
Okay.
And I used to talk with him about it all the time. And I think apparently that game is really, really, really popular in Korea.
Okay.
And like the aesthetics of it and everything. And I think that's almost like I look at it as kind of like it might be like the inverse image of the way that a lot of Western people, like in the, post-globalization, Western people have been exposed to the more polytheistic, organic, like Eastern way of like Eastern aesthetics, where things are in balance and it's like about like it's like Taoism, like Wu Wei, like aligning yourself with the world, swimming with the current, that kind of thing. And that's, it's complementary to if you've grown up in a Western context, that view of the world, that polytheistic view of the world is like the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy gains that you have by developing a sensitivity to that way of looking at things because it balances you out, because it's the opposite of what you've inherited. So I think that in the Eastern world, I always found it interesting to imagine, like, are there like people in like Japan or Korea or something sitting around going like seeing in Western civilization or like the game Fallout, this kind of like exotic, protagonism, kind of like this sort of like almost like being inspired by the idea of looking at the world as an adversary.
Yeah.
And it must be. I think it's almost like an exact mirror image. Like you have, like I wonder what if you've grown up in like a culture that is, because like look at hippies. Like in the 60s and 70s, like to this day, hippies idealized Eastern aesthetics.
Yeah. Like
to a comical degree. So I think on some level, probably that we're not as aware of because we're not in there. I wonder if there's like New Age people in Eastern countries that idealize
yeah.
Western civilization, Western aesthetics. They go together. That's the important point there. Is that, living in a globalized world is a huge opportunity for unity and for common ground amongst people who've kind of synthesized different sides of that polarity, regardless of where you start.
Mm-hmm.
Even in technology, like we talked about a few pods back, like how Japanese technology is an incredibly powerful thing because it synthesizes East and West.
Yeah.
And there's something really productive about that. There's something really cool about that. I wonder, like, what, I
also remember the scene in Miyazaki's last film, The Wind Rises. It's about the Zero Fighter, and it's about the engineer who designed it. And him and his team go to Germany to look through all their warships, or their planes, and take notes. And like...
Oh, is this Miyazaki's last film? His most recent one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I think I've read something about this.
I'm just thinking of a scene where all the Japanese nerds get a paid trip by Mitsubishi / the Japanese government, a paid trip to go to Germany because they're like the main allies they have in World War II, and compare notes with each other. And so like even before that huge mutagenic event of getting atom bombed, and like forcibly imprinted with the Western zeitgeist, they were still they were already like seeking to take the best of Western civilization to further the Japanese culture, to go even further.
I think Japan has a long history of that.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, there apparently back in the day when the Portuguese first made contact and kind of like opened up relations. I think it was like, I can't remember if it was like the 15th. You probably know more about this. 16th century, something like that.
It's about right.
Yeah, there was a period of contact. And then Japan went into this isolationist mode because it was causing social disturbances. However, they set aside...
And Christianity was this virus.
Yeah.
It was immediately this virus taking over the state-enacted Buddhism.
Yeah, just how, like, Zen Buddhist shit is this virus that was undermining... I mean, like, hell, Alan Watts, literally.
Yeah.
Who I quote him all the time. He was, like, literally an enthusiast of, Eastern shit. But... Apparently the Japanese back in like this, like around like the 17th century, they had this, during that period of isolation, they wanted to still remain in contact with Western technology, and so the Japanese government set up this little island in the harbor.
Yeah, traders could only go to the island. They could never actually see the mainland.
Yeah, and they had this thing where like once per year or something, they had this deal with the Portuguese where a Portuguese delegation would come and they would just come to this island and they would bring with them like technology and books and science and all this stuff, and they would have like experts meet on this little island and like learn. Mm-hmm. And I found this it was really, really, really fascinating to look at.
And they made sure to service the island with tons of prostitutes.
Oh, really?
So that the white people
I didn't know that part.
So the white people would be too distracted.
Sweeten the deal a little bit, yeah.
Too distracted to wonder about what was on the mainland.
They apparently, there's like a bunch of books that were like commissioned by the Japanese government where they wrote down everything they learned. And so there's like these Japanese books from like hundreds of years ago that describe like a hot air balloon and describe like a clock mechanism and describe like a little like scientific experiments that are like re-implementations of all this shit that was going on in Europe at the time. I was like, that's actually really fucking cool in a way. So it shows you that like
you're gonna have analogs of that when alien contact is made.
Oh.
Like, if we're smart, we'll only let the aliens land on our moon base.
A little outpost.
And they'll never be allowed to actually come to Earth.
Man, that'd be so... Alien diplomacy would be so fucking cool. I want that to be real.
You should read Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card.
Isn't Orson Scott Card, didn't he also write Ender's Game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaker for the Dead is the sequel, and it's real, practical, rational thinking about alien diplomacy. And
that's sick.
And I've brought it up in the podcast because he's the one. Orson Scott Card made The Hierarchy of Otherness, and the top of the hierarchy is human-to-human relationships. The bottom of the hierarchy is human to alien. No communication possible. And there's categories intervening.
Like dogs would be somewhere in the middle.
No, dogs are basically at the bottom.
Okay.
Like, no real communication possible. Like, we have concluded that is not human. There's no way it can be a human. But intervening tiers are like, this could be a human, but communication isn't good enough. We can't be sure.
Yeah, if humans ever come in contact with aliens, that is going to force probably an incredibly interesting and creative, explicit formulation of what we mean when we say human.
Yeah, it'll come to mean a being enlightened by the spirit of intelligence, enlightened by the spirit of free will, or of consciousness.
Yeah, I think
that will not mean like an ape humanoid 4 limbs thing.
I feel like there's
like the light behind your eyes will be what makes you human.
Yeah,
not what your body looks like.
Maybe almost like the ability to suffer. the ability to have preferences about. I think that's like what we, because, like in the show Westworld, that's one of the main kind of questions that raises, where they have like this park where there's all these android robots that are in there, and people go in and you can do whatever you want to the robots. You can kill them, or you can rape them, or you can, and it's like grotesque because they look exactly like people, but in the future, in that show, everyone is like, just has rationalized, have convinced themselves that like it's just a machine. It's a very, very cleverly constructed illusion. These are robots. Look, we can point to the code. We can turn them off whenever we want to. We can fix them arbitrarily. We can make copies. We can do whatever we want. So you don't need to feel bad about whatever you do to them. And of course, that's like the creative tension of the whole thing, where it raises that question of like, well, it gets into some very fuzzy territory, and it kind of speaks to the idea that maybe what we consider human is something we have like a moral obligation to. And I guess by that definition, animals have we obviously ascribe some humanity to animals, because you can't do whatever you want to animals.
I don't know. You can't even...
I think so. There's laws. There's like literally laws against animal cruelty.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I don't know, too. I don't know that the basic premise of Westworld is even true to the human condition. I don't think that people are champing at the bit for a chance to rape defenseless lesser beings, or looking for guns to go shoot someone who's defenseless.
As if that's some kind of like tide that's just held back by social convention.
I don't think that's what's happening at all.
I don't think so either.
So I think the basic premise from which Westworld begins its exploration is wrong.
Okay, well, to be fair to Westworld, there's a range of characters that have different feelings and kind of portray different viewpoints on that.
But the human species in general is portrayed to be one that would make Westworld a successful corporation.
Well, I'm pretty sure that if Westworld did exist in real life, there'd be plenty of customers. I'm sure
I don't think so.
I think
you'd be ashamed of yourself, and I think you'd be ashamed of knowing anyone who went there to do that kind of shit.
Yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of people in the world who, like, I don't know, the story of history shows that people are entirely capable of, like, some people sometimes are entirely capable of treating other people as if they're not humans.
But I think they're the minority.
Yeah, sure, of course they're the minority. Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I think globally, all you would need is a few. I don't know where I come down on this. There's a helicopter. I don't know, what do you think is the percent? I think I operate on the assumption that about 1% of people, around like 1% of people are like, not even evil, but just don't have the thing inside them that would stop them from, like, they're just like sociopaths, kind of.
Sure.
You put a sociopath in a position of power and, well, you're rolling the dice. You don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
There's no guardrails.
Let's reiterate the thingy blob.
Here, you can read it. I'm going to roll another cigarette.
Oh, I put a little default pic on my Signal profile.
You did? Where? Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. Did that just get grabbed from your contacts?
I put it there.
Oh, I just haven't seen it in a while.
Forgot I put it there.
Wait, do I have a profile pic on mine?
No.
Okay, thank God.
It's just SB.
Yes. my
when I'm calling you, though, I wish you had a profile pic, because it just says SB huge on my screen while I'm waiting for you to answer.
No, I don't want a profile pic. I don't want the NSA having my profile pic.
It's Signal. It's the NSA.
Hey, you can't be too careful. I trust Signal for now. This is a digression, but I think that just like
I think the more functions they provide to be more and more like every other app, the the harder it is.
Yeah, well, I mean,
becomes.
so the guy who made Signal, Moxie Marlinspike, is I've read his blog since like 2010.
Yeah.
He's a legit guy. I actually think that like that man has personal integrity. He actually cares about humanity, and I think he made a great thing. However, eventually, any centralized service is going to come under, is going to be appropriated by other centralized mechanisms. Anyways, I don't want to go into a huge decentralization thing. That's risky. 30 minutes later, I'll still be talking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Long growth creativity requires long growth personal fertility. Personally residing in a fertile ground where new ideas can land inside you or regularly come up from the soil of you. Long growth creativity requires long growth personal fertility. Fertility requires growing trust, i.e., progressing integrity. Progressing integrity requires personal morality. A personal morality requires focus on a transcendent ideal. One thing that's implied in here that isn't exactly stated, but I say progressing a couple different times.
Yeah.
There's an implication there that none of this is set and forget. These are daily practices of mindfulness and progress and meaningful action and meaningful work. And morality has to be included in that process of progressing your morality. And so progressing your morality requires a place you're getting to, a transcendent place that you're trying to achieve morality-wise. And that's where ideas of a God image become necessary. So some kind of God image is necessary to being creative and productive in a meaningful way long term, not just as an accident of your youth.
What is your transcendent ideal?
That you create your reality, and everyone's creating their reality, and there's a future object of a critical mass of people taking responsibility for just how ceramic this world is and how created it could be. And so you just naturally go to, okay, well, if I'm creating my reality, what's the best thing, what's the best reality I could be creating? And so it's better long-term to project omniscient, benevolent, ultimately fertile, ultimately good thing that is always out of your present reach, but within your ability to achieve. If you were in charge of creating your reality, you would want to create a reality that was unendingly fascinating and unendingly progressive and unendingly full of things to discover.
So
that's what you would create.
So you have like this. That's like what a wizard would say. You have a wizard view of the world. You see, yeah, like so in the ideal transcendent reality, you perceive a world where people can embrace that creative aspect of themselves.
Where they can embrace any good aspect of themselves, and then once they achieve it, there's something greater by way of achieving that there's something greater than that to achieve
So there's like
on the shoulders of that.
So there's
always more, always more.
Yeah, always more. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good news. I think there's a lot of evidence that is the base. In fact, the base reality. I think it's almost like we're in that, whether or not we know it. It's just a question of whether you admit it or not. It's almost like
admitting it is what gives you a personal morality.
So it's like if you remove the mental rationalizations that you've constructed about why things can't happen, you realize that they already are, and that you were just talking yourself out of it. Yeah. So I mean, I feel that, definitely. I feel like most of my progression in life has been progression sort of by subtraction. Like, a lot of the things I've learned in my life have been, the greatest things I've learned have taken the form of generalizations.
Okay.
Like, where I understand that I was, like, the removal of arbitrary distinctions. And I think this just kind of speaks to the way I think about things in general, is that I think that, like, there's a there's a comparison here to be made about how Elon Musk said one time, and I'm quoting the great Saint Elon here, so maybe that reveals something about me, but he said, he was giving this talk about, like, his design philosophy, where he was, and the salient part I'm referring to is where he said, the best part is no part. So, like, if you are building a rocket...
Greater understanding being illustrated by subtracting more superfluous stuff.
So, like, if you can do, like, if you're
a better app has less buttons.
Yes, but no less capability. Because the more, like, if you want to create a really robustly engineered thing, you want to have as few parts as possible, because every part that exists contains the possibility for failure. So I look at that engineering philosophy as being somewhat comparable to a kind of epistemological view, kind of like an epistemological framework where I go, you know what are the things that I know? What is true? What do I want? The more I dig into it, the simpler and simpler and simpler, and yet the more and more integrated that ideal becomes. So, like, it's not like I'm losing any potency of what I want or what I think is true or what I think is real, but I'm getting, from the outside it looks simpler, but on the inside it's more complex.
And
so
what's that clarity look like?
Well, like,
in simplicity
it's
of
like,
your focus.
It's like realizing that, okay, for instance, because the main task of everyone is to figure out, what do you want? Like, before you decide how you're going to get it, you have to figure out, what do you want? And that's, like, weirdly glossed over in a lot of cultural programs, like going to college or something. There's, like, It's assumed
what you want is already assumed for you and not even questioned, but then not even articulated.
Well, like,
either.
and all of the credit you get is for doing something, but there's relatively little attention paid to whether or not you're actually like going in the right direction. So I don't know. I feel like, I think education would be a lot better if, like, the first year or two of your studies was like, this is the first thing you have to learn about is yourself. And then once you do that, you might be in a position to, like, pick a good direction or something like that. So anyways, I don't want to get from the weeds there. But yeah, so if you asked, like, what is that for me?
Yeah, what's that emerging simplicity
it's a kind
starting
of,
to look like?
Well, it takes the form of a kind of lifestyle where I'm able to maintain and sustain the ability to always be doing something that personally interests me and has meaning. So, like, because like in the past, I always thought that it would be cool to, live on a boat, and sort of like just like sail around the ocean and explore things and kind of like get in touch with the sort of adventure spirit of humanity. The kind of like, kind of like the explorer archetype. And I used to think, okay, well, for that I'm going to need money. So I need a career to fund it. So I'm going to do this, X, Y, Z, and then like save some money and then do this, and then I'm going to check out and I'm going to be gone. I'm out, folks. Sail away. Okay. So that's probably one way to do it, but I don't really want that anymore because I've realized that, God, I would be so bored if I was doing that. Because as soon as I got what I wanted, I would start craving, oh man, like, what am I going to do now, right? That would just get old. So my more newly integrated thing is that I don't want one thing and then another thing. I've managed to merge those two things into the idea of like, I've realized like I don't ever want to retire, ever. I want to be like fucking 99 years old and still be like having a deadline that I'm trying to meet. Yeah. Because that's what keeps me alive. And so I've realized like, I need to find a way to just like, I'm trying to put all my energy towards like, like that's why I drove here yesterday, like working in the van, bringing my computer with me. And just not having this division between work and life. And it's difficult because, I'm changing my structure a little bit. But I've been on this trip for a few years, and it's made me a lot happier than I have been before. I never wake up in the morning and think, fuck, anymore. And I remember that used to be a big feature of my life, was just going like, well, I guess Adam's curse, you know what I mean? Like, this is the vestige of that conservative upbringing where, like, work is punishment. What the fuck? Work is punishment? What a weird idea. What a disabling idea that is.
Yeah.
What a self-contradictory idea that is.
Keeps you from giving your best work.
Yeah, so my relationship to work has been radically remade by integrating the idea of freedom and productivity. Because I used to think that first productivity, basically that productivity buys you freedom. And now I realize like, no, like they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Productivity, creative freedom is like, I'm not under the illusion that I'm ever going to get what I want. I already have what I want. And what I want is constantly changing. And like, if I'm not happy now, I'm not going to be happy. There's no future point. Like, I've accepted the fact that the way I feel right now is how pretty much I'm always going to feel. And I'm okay with that. I'm not going to, like, reach some point in my life where I wake up every morning and go, like, yay! Like, no. Like, I'm going to wake up and make my cup of coffee and whatever. Life's, like my day-to-day emotional experience is going to be more or less constant. I'm fine with that. So I'm not chasing that anymore. I'm quite satisfied. I just am more interested in like almost like building up like a more distilled thing from that. Like kind of like squeezing the magical, mystical essence of whatever results from continuing to have that attitude. That's where I'm at right now. That's open to revision. If we, who knows fuck knows what life is going to be like. In like 40 years, I could be living in some kind of Mad Max caravan or something. Anything's on the table. It's a long ass time. You ever like look at a calendar and like look at the year, like think how old you're gonna be, and like for some reason I was like looking at the year like 2031, that sounds like a super futuristic sci-fi Star Trek kind of year. I'm going to be 42. You know what? That's not that fucking, like, I see people in Chico all the time that are like that old and they just look, okay, they're the same as me. All right. Like, nothing's going to fundamentally change about me. I'm going to be the same person, but just in the future. If I would have, like, looked, my teenage self would have been like, 2021, oh my God. You know, you're probably going to be like, I, like, imagine myself at this point in my life having, like, a big mortgage and, like, all this stuff. Like, nah, that's not true. Like, it's, so I don't project on the future like that in concrete terms like I used to. I project on the future a kind of lifestyle ideal rather than like a material ideal. It's more interesting that way. I don't trust myself enough to know what's good for me in 10 years. I trust myself plenty to know what's good for me right now. And what's good for me right now implicitly contains what's good for me in 10 years. So in a way, I am trusting myself. I'm trusting my present self rather than like a constructed future image of myself.
The way I build and navigate and make choices now is about the generative nature of one path versus another. Like, I can rationalize a harder path now, or pain now, voluntarily assumed, because I see what kind of paths it opens into the future versus an easier path that, like, constricts the amount of possibilities in the future. That's kind of how I gauge the lifestyle now in regards to the far future. Is like, I don't know what's gonna happen out in 10 years from now, but I know that I'm, like, seeding as many parallel paths of probable futures. I want my actions and lifestyles now to produce 20 probable Alexes instead of just, like, 2 probable Alexes.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. Like, opening doors.
Like, what? Yeah. I can do this. I can do this sort of thing now, and it's hard, but to do it now speaks to being a kind of person that's going to be maximally successful 10 years from now in, like, 20 different vocations.
It reminds me of that line from some German philosopher. Can't remember his name. But he said, all that is but a symbol. And I think that there's something there about how, like, the present contains the past, but it also contains the future.
And we have we have subconsciously made a symbol out of this episode of the podcast, where we're out here.
Yeah, it's a symbol.
We're out in nature to do the day's work.
Yeah, I've noticed.
We're out exploring a new locale, and the engine of exploring that locale is doing the day's work that we always do on Friday mornings.
Yeah, I know we have been going out in the woods a lot more. I like the woods. It's a lot better. There's no leaf blowers.
Not yet.
Not yet. No, there's something about like the soft grass. I just fucking love it. Like, yeah. I think that's where I want my work-life synthesis thing to progress towards. Is like, in the future, I want to have, I don't know if I want like a, big office to work in or something. I think I just want to go out and, like, set up a tent in the grass somewhere and do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because, like, solar panels, eventually Starlink, eventually, I think that's, that seems like the future. That seems like the new wave of the future is a kind of, like, decentralization. And actually, decentralization includes You know what it is? My transcendent ideal is decentralization. I've said this before. That's what it really comes down to. Decentralization contains an implicit integration because it's more complex. Simply because it's more complex. If you are going out and you're working in different places every single day, you're constantly being forced to define and you're keeping in contact with what kind of environment you like to be in.
And you're also continually re-articulating not the exact structure of what your work is, but what the principle of your work structure is.
And what the aesthetic of it is.
Because you have to carry the principle of your work structure more than the reality of it, because your work structure has to be modular to every different environment you might find yourself in.
Man, I think there's a future there in terms of your line of work as well. With all the restrictions and stuff, with all the COVID restrictions, your future is probably going to include doing forest shows.
Yes. Yeah.
Among other things.
Well, it's going to include a lot of weird underground kind of shows.
Yeah.
The
alternative venues.
The only requirement is like space. The only requirements are space and power and loudness. It's got to be really loud.
I wonder how you could get enough electricity to power shit without like a generator running. Maybe like a massive battery bank, like a Tesla Powerwall or something like that.
On wheels.
On wheels, yeah. Like a van that just has like massive battery banks in it. On
work and play and how that's changed over time, like I definitely was like set against work for a long time growing up, and that's part of my personal mythology of being set against manliness and being set against like being in a physical world where I'm more natively given to a dreaming reality where I don't have to be pinned down to any like actual physical rules. I can just dream infinitely.
Now we witness the correction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like what decided a lot of my big career moves out of college was pleasure, and just like, okay, fuck work altogether. Fuck what work is supposed to be altogether. It's all about pleasure. It's all about fun. That's the goal here. And but now, like, the only way to increase the fun is to work harder in things that are meaningful to me. And so when I hit my 7th week, where I take a whole week to chill back and not work, the last off week, I just found myself, like, working all week. But, like, it was for fun.
Right.
I was working for fun instead of
That's so funny.
Instead of for
right.
I don't know what. But this is my idea of fun, right here.
I hope so.
Like you put me in like an open festival context where it's just about like I don't know what, drugs and music and dancing. Like I'll partake a little bit of the drugs and the music and the dancing, but if I don't have something meaningful to do, that's like progressing my entire like career, then I'm not having as much fun. And I do. You said like right now you see the same basic feelings of your life being pretty continuous. Like you'll still have the same basic feeling about waking up that you do now 10 years from now. And I don't see that. I think things do get more and more and more ecstatic, or could get more and more ecstatic, more and more fulfilling. Work itself can be more and more like play, and pure play can be more and more productive, as if you were like doing meaningful work.
Yeah, we have to retire this distinction. This distinction doesn't serve us. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of work and play, the distinction between work and play is an interesting idea. I think it's probably like a post-industrial kind of attitude.
Like there's a line from the Jane Roberts books that she channeled from some disembodied voice. There's a line that sticks with me of you take work or you take life too seriously as a culture, and you don't take play seriously enough.
Oh, interesting.
Like play is a really important part of thinking. Like if you are trying to innovate something in your software, or for me, come up with new and more interesting music, play is a really important part of the thought process.
Yeah, I think that the art of the controlled accident is something to keep in mind, realizing that like your ability to do really good work is premised on enjoying what you're doing, and it's not something that you can really intend to do directly. The best you can do, and I mean the best, not in like a alternative is the next best, but the actual best. The best thing you can do is to put yourself in a situation where you feel close to spontaneity, where you feel like you're just like all that's required for you is to open the door. It makes that one quote I was talking about a few weeks ago about how like if you're an artist or you're creative, your obligation is not even you don't even have to like your own work. What you have to do is just keep the channel open. You just have to open the door.
Just show up to it and transmit it authentically.
Yeah, just be willing to just open the door and accept what happens. And that's kind of like a trust in yourself that something bad isn't going to come out of you.
Well, it's also like building structures that need and benefit from your spontaneity, good or bad. Like getting close to spontaneity, you said that's like the best thing. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to build with my wheel of careers is like every different day and segment of time has like a direction the spontaneity would ideally be channeled in, but the success of the work of that day is dependent on how freely playing I am. Like this podcast is a good example. Just showing up to see what's here and play with what's here and put blocks together, the blocks being ideas. But I can see the stability of what I'm doing now because of how embracing it is of wherever I happen to be on a given week or on a given month. Like I've been able to navigate crippling depression and suicidal ideation in its most intense expressions I never even knew could be like encountered, and all it's done is show up the integrity and stability of the structures I've made, because all that any of my activities need me to do is show up the way I am, and the work gets done, and the art is made, and new stuff is made. I don't know where I'm going with that. except that like I started with just play, and then generally I perceived the buckets that can most reliably catch the kind of spontaneous moods I go through, and like start to see what kind of moods I'm regularly in and build buckets that catch the best of those moods.
Yeah, it's like I think there's like a saying like if you're trying to get away from the devil, don't give him advance notice. Like don't tell yourself that you're going to do something that you should, because then you're setting up the ability for the devil to undermine you. Because who do you think the devil is? You know, like you are sort of it's like you have to get yourself in a place where you kind of like naturally do the thing you wanted and then realize it. Like it's that's like where freedom is to me. Like freedom is something that is emanating from you, but you can convince yourself that it's necessary to like that somehow if you don't get mental, like if you don't realize that somehow it's going to slip away. Well, it's not true at all. You're always free. You're always acting free. You're always doing exactly what you want, which might include convincing yourself that you should be doing something. That's clearly what you want to do. If you're telling yourself, if you have an internal dialogue that is trying to make yourself do something, that is literally what you want to do. The evidence being it's what you're doing. And it sounds like I'm going in circles, but I really think there's something there that if you're trying to escape from blockages like depression, I've gone through depression in my life once or twice, and I remember that the worst thing about depression was just like thinking too much. It wasn't actually anything more than kind of like the incursion of a substituted symbolic reality that limited my awareness of my own nature, which fundamentally hadn't changed. But after a while, you can start to think that you're different, or that parts of you have been lost, or that like you, are literally becoming dumber or something. Like I actually felt like a reduction in my intelligence. Because in Finland, I went through some like seasonal affective, it was 7 months of darkness, being cooped up in a small block house. Not a great recipe for, it is a great recipe for overthinking things. And that's where I really after that, I became acutely aware of the reductive nature of self-images. That like, having a I should put it this way. I think the healthy way to have a self-images should be retrospective. So like, do what you're going to do, get out of your own way, and then behold who you are. You don't need to invent it. Because if you, like, put it this way, like if you think you can invent, like if you think that if you think you need to be improved and that you're going to think of how you should be, why do you trust that you, in your state of needing to be improved, knows what's good for you? Like, why would you, does a sick patient work on themselves? No, they have a problem. You need you need something else. And of course, in your own life, like that something else, there's a deeper part of you. There's like the unarticulated, unconscious, very powerful, very free, willful part of you that is going to do what it's going to do. And getting out of that, like just realizing that you're always doing what you want and that your image of yourself is something that just, like if you start letting your self-image become future-oriented, it starts getting into a little feedback cycle where it eventually reaches a point where you hit up against this kind of like point where it just feels so limiting that you go, fuck, and you just you flip over the board, and then I'm back where I started. I always was here. You know, and then hopefully you have the wisdom to avoid repeating the cycle again. I think, you know, that's probably why you need disruption in your life from time to time. Like, I think there is an indirect way of seeking out disruption, putting yourself in situations where, like, you didn't plan for, you're not sure how to handle. That's almost like a prophylactic that gives, like, there's something about life where if you know what you're doing, you're liable to fuck it up. I've been on this unconsciousness bent for a few weeks now, because it's really working for me. I've been starting to do this thing where instead of writing to-do lists, I'm writing down, like, to-done lists, where I, like, have a catalog at the end of my day of the things I did, and then just think about it. And then that naturally helps me know where to go the next day. And then I kind of so I retrospectively chronicle my progress. And it's a lot less anxiety inducing, because you're not doing this thing where you're like kind of like flagellating yourself in the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I flagellate myself a bit.
We all do.
Because I don't want to be okay with not playing shows.
Yeah.
I don't want to be okay with that. What I want to be doing is playing shows.
Yeah.
But then, an over-focus on that muddies up the path of how to get there, which is by way of embracing what I want to be doing right now.
Yeah, you have to have a rock-solid basic faith that the future that you want is the future you're going to get. I sort of imagine this thing like, if there was a genie or like there was some sort of time traveler that came back and told me, hey, like, I've seen into the future, this is what's going to happen to you. And I'm like, and it was a good thing, and it's like some exciting future. And that, like, just have to wait. I'd be like, oh, yes, okay, finally, I can stop worrying about things. I'm just going to do stuff. And you know what? I'd probably really speed up my progression to that. There's something about anticipation that is limiting.
Yeah, but I don't have that rock solid faith that I'll get there. Well, and I also have it's not an interesting path to me if I'm sure I'm gonna get there.
Well,
I wouldn't...
You're gonna get somewhere.
I wouldn't be excited by making this album Accelerant with Ade if I was so firmly couched in the full crystallization of it, and I knew we were capable of it. Like, if we aren't capable of it right now, that's why it's an exciting thing to do.
Yeah.
Is because it transforms us into something we are not yet in order to make this album.
Yeah. That's why that future time traveler is fundamentally a silly idea, because the essence of persisting in the face of uncertainty is that's the salt that gets baked into the final product that makes it worthwhile.
I know we'll get there.
Right.
I mean, that's probably one of the deepest knowings I have, is that I can do this. But then there is a spice of I have no fucking idea if I'm going to make it.
Well, I think from the outside, it's very clear to me that you do believe that you will, because otherwise, why the hell would you be doing this? You know, actions are evidence of what you really believe.
I don't know. Maybe I'm in some fucking psychic trap, or I'm never going to play a show again. That's what I think in my darker moments.
Right.
Like, am I just endlessly rationalizing this state I'm in right now?
Well, there's this saying, like, the greatest failure is the failure to try. The unwillingness to try. Like, you know, this is the Michael Jordan, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, blah, 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 that whole thing. Like, that's kind of like a triviality, it seems like it's overplayed, but there's really something there. I think there really is something to the idea that, like, in the present moment, your willingness to do things is your future, right there. Your future is encapsulated in every day.
I one antidote to that, like, fear of, like, oh, am I just, like, fooling myself, is to look around me and look at what other people are doing with their lives. And there isn't anybody doing anything interesting with their lives or with this world we're in. Everyone's just like rabbits hiding in a hole.
Well, I think there's plenty of people doing interesting things. I don't know enough of them.
I don't know many of them. I know you. You are doing a life that's inspiring to me. And I am, Ade is, Jade is,
Yeah.
Sarah is, so like
Alicia is.
So
My
like
brother is.
So I know that most people aren't, and only a few people are, and that's worth anything. But then that, like, worth anything is a sort of like trap I can get into of convincing myself that drudgery is necessary to, like, get there. So if I'm willing to accept anything to get accelerant done, then maybe I accept things that don't have to be accepted. I'm out in the weeds here.
We are out in the weeds. In fact, we're in a field of weeds.
Yeah.
But that's what is actually that's the real meaning of being out in this forest. This is the metaphor for this podcast. We should just call it weeds. Out in the weeds.
20 views per video, 30 views per video.
No, I love that though, dude. That's amazing. That's you know what? See, the real artists on YouTube are the 20 view hipster club. Oh yeah. We don't want millions of views like everyone else. No. This is part of the art form is having 22 views per video and continuing to do it. But I love that though. It's great. Like you know what this reminds me of?
It's good for this time.
This is something that I had this thought about a golden age the other day. And about how, like, the thing about a golden age is that when you're in a golden age, you don't know you're in a golden age. And actually, maybe don't think about it too much, because don't talk yourself out of the goal. You know, like, so my point of this is that we're always in a golden age. We don't know it. Golden ages can only be seen after the fact. But we're definitely in the golden age of something right now.
I think it's, do I? Yes, I agree completely with that. Maybe not the attitude that prescribes that you just said. I'm not sure I agree with that. I like leveraging that knowledge to make it even more of a golden age for people to look back on. But also, we're always in an apocalypse. Mm-hmm. The world is always ending. Mm-hmm. It's always a hellscape. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of what you're choosing to stress in your own experience.
Yeah, the world is always being born and dying. It's always heaven and it's always hell.
And to tie back something that you said, if people are always just doing what they basically wanted to be doing anyway, people like focus on an apocalypse if that justifies the hiding away from the world and hiding their face to everybody that they already wanted to do anyway. People are fine with quarantine. People are fine with masking up infinitely. People are fine with, like, having a second-class citizenry that they can look down on. So they play up the apocalypse narrative to justify that way of life that they were already pining for anyway. And there's some, like, optimistic mirror of that too that's less depressing.
I think it's less pining and more settling, which might be mistaken for pining if that's all you have.
But golden age, I definitely think we're in a golden age. I think Chico has been this golden pocket, this flower of a protected place that's more fertile, and things can grow here that can't find root in many other places in the world.
You know what Chico is? Chico is like Portland in 1999.
What was Portland like
It was like Chico.
in 1999?
It was a weird artistic town that didn't have a self-consciousness
Yeah,
as much.
yeah,
And that's why it was in a golden age. Because people just did what they wanted, and they didn't think about what they were supposed to do to maintain the image of what other people thought and why they moved
Sure.
here and quit their job to live in a van and open a brew pub. You know,
yeah.
like, oh, you found that it wasn't as satisfying as, you know, like, well, yeah, it's like, to me, that's what faith is. Faith is weirdly, the way I think of faith is it's kind of like the opposite of belief. Or another way of saying that is that a belief is a testament to a lack of faith. Because it's a kind of like crutch. It's going like, if you tell yourself, you know, like this going, you know, like the whole like motivational book train or whatever, like repeating affirmations to yourself, I think you're just betraying your own insecurity about things. And maybe it helps some people, so I don't know, maybe it's, I can't speak about this universally, but for me, it's like, I always know that if I'm telling myself something about myself, the reason I'm telling myself about something by myself is because I feel insecure about being that way. I don't go around telling myself things that I'm completely sure of. Why would I do that?
Okay, so... Okay. I'm thinking of like retroactively taking stock of myself and where I've been, and in my darker moments, the stronger voices that have spoken up to like bolster me and pick me up and validate my experience and give me strength to move forward. Those voices have been retroactive looks at what I've achieved and looking at the way I'm navigating a hard spot right now, and it's speaking to something deeper than belief. Like, it's belief bolstered by years of action and truth and evidence of like, you're not like, in those moments it's been like, Alex, you don't need to like become stronger or like fix these broken things. You need to look at how way stronger and more durable you never even knew you were this strong and durable. Like, you need to just look at your to-done list and just sit with that for a moment.
Yeah.
And realize there's like, you're more healthy than you knew it was even possible to be.
Yeah.
And that's not something to instantiate now of like, I'm healthy. I'm more healthy than I ever thought I was. No, it's just like, no, just look at what the fuck you've done.
It's an observation rather than an aspiration.
Yeah. But I don't come down on that the way you did in speaking it. Like, I need my aspirations.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that like aspirations, goals, dreams, it's better to formulate aspirations with symbolic, archetypical language, which like to be able to they're more like the dreams are called dreams, not just because they're in the future. Like, it's what a weird word, you know what I mean? Like, when people say like, what are your dreams? Well, what do you mean? Like, are you talking about like, what did I dream about last night? Or like, what are my future aspirations? We use the same word for that. And I think that is not a coincidence, because why do we call your vision of the future the same word as the weird archetypical psychedelic experience that we have when we go to sleep sometimes? Well, maybe because that's the proper language for describing the future, is the same language that our dreams are described in. Like, and that's why, if your dreams become something that can be, that you can like put on a spreadsheet, well, maybe you need new dreams, I never dreamt of a spreadsheet. And I pity the fool who asks.
It's making me also think of like occasional glimmers I get, like if I catch myself in the mirror or something, or on one of our videos, like this 5, 10, 12, 14-year-old Alex pops up and sees through my eyes.
Right.
And sees like, what the fuck?
I know.
Who is that?
I know.
And he is really fucking excited. Like, oh, I'm like dissatisfied and like trudging away and like trying really hard and uncertain if I'll like make it at all. But my 14-year-old self is just fucking
stoked,
over the moon to see this weird fucking this thing. This is like way cooler than he ever thought he would get to be.
Yeah.
And doing things that he never thought he'd be like capable of doing. And what did he do that made that made this possible?
What the hell is 14-year-old Alex? Did you get good grades in school or bad grades?
Good grades, effortlessly. Nice. I kept it at a 3.5 very intentionally. Like, it was always in danger of going over that, and I treated like any opportunities to get over that, over 3.5, I consciously shunted into like fucking off or playing around or partying to like keep it from going over 3.5.
Wow.
Because I knew it was a trick. I knew GPA.
You knew? Oh man, I didn't used to know that.
And I knew the GPA was a sham, and that like the real life experience happened after school hours, and like the only point of it was to make sure I got into a college I wanted. And so I knew 3.5 plus my own passion would get me to any college I felt like going to.
And the joke was on you. Because you ended up tossing that away, right?
Yeah, college is a fucking joke.
You know, the more time goes on, the more satisfied that I feel about not taking... Well, I mean, which is weird for me to say, because I've been to like 3 different colleges. But I suppose that I've never used that education to acquire employment. I ended up just being a programmer, which is probably the field where the degree is least important, aside from being an artist. Okay, no, artist is actually probably one above that, but...
Yeah, college is the anti-art.
It is at this point, isn't it? Right, yeah. It's, you know, maybe there's some really cool, like, alternative colleges out there I could see. I think there's, like, a college that's being started recently that's trying to, well, I don't know if that's the same thing, but I think there's probably some smaller schools that have, like, some hippie schools or something.
You get some good stuff by accident.
Right.
Like James Jean, a really established visual artist, just posted this week about one of his mentors who just retired from teaching at some New York college that James Jean went to. And he's a really great artist, a really great painter, this mentor. And James Jean is one of the most successful visual artists in the world right now. And he's got a really established style that you can tell is James Jean. So college helped him.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's like...
Well, the problem of college now is that, like, they've purged all aspects of counterculture from the institution.
Yeah.
And it's just entirely overrun by, like, bureaucracy and is more or less a bastion of establishment politics. And so, like, how are you going to get an education in that environment? I just
can't see how...
Yeah.
I'm just being moody right now.
Sure.
Going to somewhere to do what you're told seems like the most anti-artistic thing possible you can be subscribing to. Going somewhere to be told what to do. And if you, any kind of career that's meaningful, why would you want to program it into your young, impressionable mind that doing what you're told is going to be what makes you maximally adaptable and successful and generative?
Yeah. Well, I've read a few books about that were like written by people, they were sort of like autobiographies about, and it kind of talked about their experience going through like Harvard or Oxford or like these pretty serious institutions, like in the 60s. And it sounds like if you got in, you could fuck off and you didn't have to worry so much, and you just went to your lectures, and there wasn't this constant thing where you're competing on GPA and you were going to get, and you didn't have like massive amounts of debt and all that, there was this, it was like this kind of like situation where you were surrounded by all these smart people. You could get away with all kinds of stuff. It has a very loose culture, and like surprise, surprise, that's the kind of environment that creates greatness, and innovation and discovery. It's not like bureaucracy is like just concretized administrative oppression.
Well, so maybe that is revealing one of my mission statements about Chico and leveraging this golden age we're in of a maximum equality of opportunity relative to history. And this is a university right here. And I want to leverage that and intensify that over time and get more and more and more creative, self-propelled, uniquely thinking, original thinking individuals into this place, so that if you can just get here, then you're surrounded by intelligent and creative and wonderful individuals who think for themselves, and you can do whatever you want, but you're definitely encouraged to do something.
Yeah. Almost like if there could be a club of people where the only thing they did was listen to each other and encourage each other and like behold each other. Like if you could create a culture where the point was to just try to appreciate other people as much as that you can without controlling them, that would probably be pretty great.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jade's salon.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking of. That's a perfect example of it. Yeah, where it's just like you have enough trust in each other that something good will come out of like allowing yourself to do what you want. I mean, if you don't have that, like everything else is just a delaying the inevitable crisis of meaning. You can go to an institution and sign up for a degree program because you feel like you have nothing else going on in your life. And if that's the thing that picks you up out of a depression, like I don't hold that against anyone, but I think it's not the most ideal way to find purpose, because you're taking a bit of a gamble. You might find out that you put all this energy into something you don't care about, and plenty of people do that. If you have the ability to elucidate what it is you want first, that's probably the better move. Yeah. I always got really bad grades in school. That's the reason I asked that question.
Oh.
Terrible grades.
Weird.
I got really good grades up until I was like in the 6th grade, and then something happened to me where like I just like took a different fork in the multiverse, and I think like as soon as my brain matured, I started getting really bad grades, and I just
well, yeah, getting those good grades was like proof of my ability to do as I was told. Like I think that says something better about you and worse about me.
Well, the thing is I didn't. It's not like I wasn't trying to get good grades. I just couldn't. I just didn't do my homework. Like, I just didn't do it. And the entire time I tried to make myself do it, just didn't do it. I just couldn't bring myself to do something I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And like, I've looked at this myself, and I think that like for me, one of the most central things about my life that has carried through up until this point is that I have just a wanton inability to do things that I don't find interesting. And that has been a fucking curse, but it's also been, there's a small silver lining to that, because at least I don't spend my time doing pointless shit.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm not satisfied with accepting that, because ideally, I'd be able to do both. And what I'm trying to do in my life right now is not let that be like a concrete image of myself where I go like, well, it's got me this far, I guess I have to continue just having no discipline and never making schedules, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to take a more mature view of that. So like retrospectively looking at the past and going like, well, it's good that at least that inability to do boring stuff saved me from getting pigeonholed into like, working at some kind of spreadsheet job or something. But now I'm at a point where like I feel like I've almost like squeezed that sponge enough to where I've like gotten into an interesting field. So now discipline is good for me. Mm-hmm. Discipline, if I had the most smallest ounce of it, that's the low-hanging, juicy fruit that I could just pick and it would be easy. And actually it's the Enneagram thing, actually. The Enneagram, that sort of like voodoo circle lines, you know what I'm talking about? The Enneagram.
Personality categorization.
It's a more rarefied, intellectualized version of astrology.
Yeah.
It's the direction of progression for me is into this kind of concrete organization mode of thought, and I think I'm attempting to address those asymmetries of my mode of doing things. But again, that's the future. Retrospectively, I've been saved by my lack of conscientiousness. It's what saved me from working at a job I hated for 20, 25 years.
Yeah. Doing things I didn't want to do for like a disciplinary reason is always just like a source of a lot of pain and suffering. And it's just mounting pain until I just let go of obligations and forcing myself to do things I didn't want to do. I was like able to do things I didn't want to do, but it was like this dirge of suffering that was the main flavor of my life. And like life was defined by doing things I didn't want to do and like seeking escape from those things. And so I just completely went the other direction and let go of all responsibilities, and then like voluntarily chosen responsibilities started to accrete onto that free roaming hippie child.
And you made hells.
And then
and you had to do
and then I made the most grueling testament to hard work.
But but you just recently made a hoodie about hells, so I think that's kind of,
I did.
There's something poetic about that. You haven't. It's like that's something that's I think that's beautiful.
It came back to haunt me because I needed it to really badly.
Yeah, you needed it to in a good way though. Like it's, but that's important. It's so good to have I think that's from what I see from the outside, the larger picture is, I guess what every artist is doing is making material, using the material of their own life to create things, and that then changes what your life is, in the same way that an animal is the environment, in the same way that it's a reflection of the environment. As soon as it reflects the environment changes, and then it reflects itself again and again and again, and we get the endless progression of evolution.